This conference will now be recorded.
Fantastic. I'll be recording this session and it will be available on the NNAHRA YouTube channel by this Friday. And there's some feedback. Do you mind if we all put ourselves in mute? Okay, let me try to talk now. Oh, that's much better. Well, for those who do not know NNAHRA, and it is your first time attending our coffee talk, the National Native American Human Resources Association, which is known as NNAHRA, is a nonprofit organization consisting of human resources professionals and tribal leaders working for a Native American tribe. We began in 1996 as a few tribal personnel. Yes, I said it, you guys, the word personnel. Gatherings to network and learn from one another has grown into a nation organization representing over 400 tribes nationwide. Membership is in the thousands and it increases annually. We're really excited. Our mission is to provide timely and trusted information and resources for those serving and leading tribal government and enterprises and people management, employment policy development, and capacity building across Indian country. NNAHRA's vision is to advocate, research, and educate the name of Indian country human resources to protect and honor tribal sovereignty and jurisdiction through meaningful employment practices. We at NNAHRA are a small but mighty team. We are a team of professionals composed of an elected board of directors, an appointed advisory committee, and a supporting staff of 2 members. NNAHRA provides you with the knowledge, support, and resources to lead your tribe to success while protecting its sovereignty. So who's our guest today? As with many topics, there are several ways to define financial wellness. At GuidedChoice, they take a holistic approach, focusing on each wellness aspect, physical, emotional, and spiritual. When these aspects align, people are at peace with money, able to control it versus holding them. In this session, GuidedChoice will discuss why tribal communities and employers should consider financial wellness, what a holistic approach includes, and the various methods available to your reach populations one person at a time. We're so excited to have Sarah Grambot, who is the CEO at GuidedChoice. She has such a wonderful resume to include working at Apple and currently is a very active CEO in her organization. And we're super excited to have her with us today. Before I would like to start, I would like to have our NNAHRA President, Wright, say a few words.
It'd help if I turned my mic on. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Janet, for doing a wonderful rundown on NNAHRA and our mission. As Janet mentioned, I am the president of the National Native American Human Resources Association, NNAHRA for short, because that is a mouthful. And I've been the president since 2011. And the one thing that is really special about NNAHRA is that we are all professionals working in human resources. That is one of the requirements. I'm an enrolled member of the San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians. I am the vice president of human resources at Valley View Casino and Hotel, and I'm also a director on the gaming board of directors. I started my career back in the personnel days, as Janet said it, at Hewlett-Packard Company in San Diego as an HR rep. And HR is our profession, and our desire to help people as a resource is a good one. Financial wellness, I love this topic because it is such an important topic. And speaking with my grown grandchildren, this is one of the things that they feel that they should have gotten more financial wellness training in school. And so it's a need out there, and there's a huge hole that, we need to help some of our younger members with financial wellness, and even some of us that are getting toward our retirement time. So just really want to thank you for joining us, and I'm going to hand it back to Janet.
Thank you, Judy. For the duration of our webinar, if you would like to ask Gary questions or have any comments in regards to what your tribe is doing, please feel free to utilize the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Sherry, for you. Give me 1 second.
Well, while we're getting the screen shared and set up, Judy, that's very exciting. You've been with HP. I was in HR with Apple. And ironically, many of the concepts I'm going to talk about today were really developed between HP and Apple. We were both at the time, our 401k plans were with Fidelity, and we thought, okay, Fidelity is part of it, but they're not giving us the whole piece. Plus, they're an asset manager, and we really don't want our answers coming from them because they've got a bias. So ironically, a lot of this that you're going to see today was developed through a lot of work done with Ken Rouse and HP and Apple. So that's kind of exciting to see that connection. I'd love to sit and have coffee and talk with you about some of the things we've seen. But I just really want to thank you today and thank NAHRA for the honor of being able to speak with you this morning. And I really want to thank all of you for your time. My hope is that I would honor you and your time by giving you some tools to enable you to help others. That's really our objective at Guided Choice. And we do both retirement wellness as well as financial wellness and advice kind of across the board. But just really desire to see people really begin to take care of themselves financially. It might end up being a little kludgy because I can't control the screen. We had technology woes, but Janet will click us forward. So as we look at this subject, is it moving for everyone? Or are we just staying on the same? I don't know if it's moving.
It's moving.
It is moving. Okay, so we're on the second screen. Just my screen isn't moving for some reason. Well, when we look at this, I just want to share some of the fundamentals of what financial wellness is and then provide you with an overview of some of the details in the various areas of financial wellness. Really hope to show you what a program could look like. And then how do you meet the needs of such diverse populations? Because as we're all experiencing, there's more and more diversity in the world, and we're trying to reach everyone. If we click forward, we're going to start off by looking at how a financial wellness program really helps you. Because at the end of the day, as we know from an HR perspective, if we're going to add a benefit into our benefit programs, we have to make sure that it's going to have a corresponding benefit to the employees. So when we look at that, if we click forward, we can just take a high level, and this is very high level. Obviously, there's lots of detail that goes underneath some of these studies, but PwC does an annual study on really stress and what causes the most stress to people. And when we looked at it at the data in 2020, 54%, so more than half, said that the major cause of stress in their life was financial matters or money matters and challenges. When you again kind of drill down a little bit on the data, what you can see is 38% of employees have less than $1,000 saved. So what that means is when they get into what we might call a financial crisis, they don't have any money to tap into to cover that potential financial crisis. So obviously one of the goals of a financial wellness program should be to shift these numbers to some change. But if we just stop at making sure they have enough for an emergency, That's not necessarily going to ensure the same occurs in the future. We have to really make sure that people are prepared for whatever might lie ahead. So if we click forward, some of the benefits of the wellness program. You know, one of the most significant benefits that we've seen, and interestingly, Judy, this came out of HP years ago. So back in the 1990s, we were seeing this data where we saw a significant benefit as people's knowledge in financial issues and understanding of money increased. We could actually see that they felt more in control of their money. We also did a study that indicated managers were better managers because they knew how to now deal with a budget, not only at the company level, but also at their individual level. So it actually helped the business overall. What we also saw is a reduction in stress. As you can see from the last slide, if 54% of people say that money matters are their biggest stress in life, and we know stress leads to disease, well, then we know it also leads to increased healthcare costs. And so really what we're looking at is trying to reduce that. Now, interestingly, just in the past few years, the medical journals have added a new disorder. It's called debt stress syndrome. Ironically, it's been given its own name. But in essence, it's a condition where concerns over debt really lead to mental, emotional, and even physical health problems. So this is a bigger issue than I think a lot of us really recognized early on. But it's coming to the forefront, thankfully, and solutions are coming forward. We also know if we can reduce the anxiety, we can increase productivity in all aspects of a person's life. I always say, kind of think of it like this. If you're driving your car and you haven't been to an auto repair shop in ages, let's say, and now when you drive your car, you hear this ping, you see the check engine light come on, your tire pressure's low, along with many other clear signs that your car needs help. But you just keep ignoring it, and you find workarounds because you've got places you need to go. Well, if you think about your mental state as you're driving this car, that you're not sure when it's going to break down on you, what's going to happen is you're going to make decisions to kind of get around that issue. So maybe you don't want to avoid driving fast on the highway, so you go the long way around so that you can go in a slower road or something, and you're really hoping that the car doesn't break down and leave you stranded somewhere. So all that energy and all that time spent worrying about taking the long way and all of that can just simply be eliminated if you go to the auto repair shop. Now, here's one of the interesting components of the data that we saw from PwC. 54% of the people said that number one issue of stress was financial matters, yet none of them had gone and gotten help on an ongoing way for their financial matters. So here they were trying to deal with this stress without ever taking the car to the repair shop. And so what we saw there is that, you know, you had also the issues of absenteeism, because now people have to deal with that car that won't work, or they have to deal with a late rent payment. In fact, we just saw an employee who had to do that recently, you know, had to leave work, go to the bank and deal with a whole rent brouhaha so he wouldn't get kicked out of his home. So things of that nature, when we have our money in order, it reduces absenteeism as well. And then last, but I would definitely say not necessarily least, is improving our retirement outcomes, you know, ensuring that if people take more action now, it'll positively affect the retirement outcomes later, or even just following their dreams, whatever that might be. So if we click forward, in addition, there's some potential tribal issues solved. And Janet, this one's a build, so we can go ahead and click again. Many tribes obviously are dealing with financial literacy issues, as everyone is. And you can see that across the board, given 14 states now have passed regulation that says that you have to teach financial literacy to your high school students, which I don't know why we didn't do it sooner, but now it's legislated, so now we'll be doing it. So obviously it's a key issue everywhere. But in some cases, as we know, with some of the tribes, if they are giving a stipend or giving, you know, the money is getting split out to what I would call kids at age 18 or age 21, and they don't have any financial literacy associated with that check, they're not necessarily going to make their wisest choices with that money. That's just kind of commonsensical, I think, for all of us. So there may be some specific issues you want to make sure are covered. But at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, it makes better employees. When people are aware of money and the trade-offs that go along with that, they become better employees. It also really does enable overall the tribal economic engine, which is no trifling. There's over 1 million jobs that are provided by the tribal economy. So we know that this is a significant component of the overall economic well-being. And so when people have well-being financially, they have the ability to make choices. And some of those choices oftentimes are, I want to start a business, or I want to invest in somebody else starting a business, which then grows that economic engine. If we click again, we'll see too that there can be gaming compliance issues that you want to have your program deal with. Maybe debt repayment programs where they're established and tracked and you have the data very easily, education, things of that nature that you might have to cover. Those are be specific to your own program. So if we click forward, we really see a guided choice, as we've mentioned. We look at it from a holistic approach, and there's good reason for that. We're going to drill down and see why. But really the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. If we look at the physical, that's the financial freedom aspect. And I'll go into detail on each one of these so that you can see how to define it. If we look at the emotional, that's financial happiness. And when we look at the spiritual, that's financial contentment. The key is that all aspects are of equal importance. And the reason for that is if one gets out of alignment, the others tend to follow at some point in time. So we look forward and we can check into the 4 elements of financial freedom. So we can click forward. We can really break it down into elements that are key contributing factors to the overall financial wellness. This is a pretty straightforward definition. And the reason that this is one that so oftentimes gets used, and it's one that we like, it's done by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they do studies, they've been doing studies for years, and those studies build on each other year over year, so we can really begin to see trends. But this is one of the ways that they've defined financial well-being. Number one is having control over your day-to-day, month-to-month finances. Many of us think of that as the B word and don't like it, budget being that word. In fact, well over 67% of Americans don't really have a budget. If they do, they don't live to it anyway. So it's one of those things that tends to get overlooked, and sometimes for good reason. And we don't always have to use budget in the traditional form in order to have it be a reduction of stress and worry. Because that's at the end of the day what we're trying to do, is if we can make our month-to-month bills, we tend to be a little more at peace than if we can't. So that's the first. Secondly, it's just that ability to absorb a financial shock. And that could be anything. It could be finding out you're pregnant. We just had a client that was the financial shock. I found out I'm pregnant, I'm going to have medical expenses, what do I do? It could be replacing your water heater. It can be even something like I broke the screen on my cell phone. I mean, that could be $40 to $300. So for some people, that can be a financial shock. But whatever it is, people need to be prepared for that. That removes that stress and worry. And then number 3, just being on track to meet those and achieve those financial goals that you've set. And this gets very personal for people. The one piece that I would say is kind of generic across the board is that those financial goals have to be realistic. If they're realistic, they're attainable. If they're attainable, we can have peace with that. But again, it's different for everybody. It could be buying a new car or figuring out if it's better to buy a used car. It could be, renting a larger home or buying a larger home. It can be, should I remodel or should I buy a new home? All of those kinds of personal questions are the financial goals that people, have to ask. And if they have money saved for those goals and they know they're on track for that, It brings a financial freedom. And then, and last but not least, is having the financial freedom to choose what you want to enjoy life. And again, the key here is to make room in your budget for fun and enjoyment. Nobody loves to, just live day to day, striving to just exist. We really want to thrive. And that's this piece. This is part of the thriving piece, whether that means I'm saving up to go, hunting or fishing, or a trip to go visit my family or friends, or a vacation, or maybe it means retiring early. Whatever that means to you, it's going to be specific to you. When all four of these elements are there, that's a pretty good indication you're on track for financial freedom. But you can also look at these elements and you could be saying, well, I have a lot of fun, but I also continue to be worried and stressed about my finances. So that's an indication that there might be some sort of imbalance somewhere in the equation. It's also pretty good to note that when we look at some of the studies, in fact, the Consumer Financial Bureau, what they did is they took a scale of 0 to 100, and then they checked adults, US adults. 1/3 of the US adults rated themselves below 50 for financial wellness. 1/3 were between 50 and 61, and there was only 1/3 that was above 61 on a scale of 0 to 100. I mean, we would call that pretty much a fail. But here's really, I think, the shocking news, maybe or just surprising news, is it wasn't correlated to income at all. Some people who were on the high side, the plus, over 61, they had low income. Others were on the low side and had very high income. Financial well-being, it's not simply about having enough money to be financially comfortable. We think it is, but it really isn't. It's also about being emotionally comfortable around the role of money in your life. And I'll share some examples of this. Sometimes it just blew my mind when I was in HR and I managed a lot of the benefit programs at Apple. One of the things that I think I was always shocked about is when I looked at our hardship data, the majority of the people taking out hardships had income of over 6 figures. And I was always stunned by that. I'm like, how does it happen? And I'll never forget one case was a couple, and they were taking out a hardship to adopt children. And I thought, oh, well, that's fabulous. I mean, what a great idea. What a great way to take a hardship if you're going to have to take a hardship from a 401k plan. But then when we drilled down, because you know how you had to prove need on a hardship, what was stunning is the income was well over 6 figures in the household. They had really their credit cards to the max, and they were under so much financial stress, and now here they were taking a hardship to adopt children into this. And I thought afterwards, wow, okay, that's going to be a difficult one on an ongoing basis. So we can see over and over again, the data shows us it's not always correlated to income as we think it might be. If we click forward, we can see the 5 elements of financial happiness. So this is really getting at that emotional component. And number 1 is kind of what I was just alluding to, but making sure that our income is greater than spending. Now, for us, it might seem that that's kind of intuitive, that our income should be higher than our spending. But for many people, it's not. And we can see a couple pitfalls with this oftentimes. One is just ironically, and this again, anybody can get in this position. It's not tied to income. But what can happen is you get the loss of a job in a household or a reduction in income. It can be because of a pandemic that then it impacts people's jobs, or it can be a recession. Whatever it is, there's a loss of a job, or a loss of income of some sort. But here's the real issue for people. It's very difficult for them to immediately make adjustments. And part of it's because the belief system is, well, I'll get another job soon enough, and so I don't need to cut my expenses. And sometimes cutting those expenses can be hard. Maybe you took a second job so you could send your child to private school, and now you've got a loss of income and you need to eliminate private school and make another decision. And you're thinking, well, no, I'll get a new job in 3 months. I'll be fine. You know, we can make it by in 3 months, but then the challenge is you put yourself into a hole. And what will happen over time is if that job doesn't come in 3 months, you dig the hole deeper and deeper. And so making those decisions immediately is key. Another is, again, part of the topic we talk about is financial literacy. A lot of people just have never sat down and figured it out. They never did the math, either because they didn't know how to or because they just don't want to. And we deal a lot with want to when we deal with money because it's so tied to emotion. Or it can be kind of the worst of all of them, and I only call it the worst, not because it's necessarily the worst, it's just the hardest to get, I say, healing from. And that's if you have habitual spending or habitual gambling issues. And those are addiction issues, so they definitely take longer to heal from. And it's not that we don't see it, we see it every day. People heal from these things. It's just that it resides deeper in the brain. And so it takes more time for that healing to happen, but can always happen. Another big component of financial happiness is obviously being debt-free. When you don't owe anybody, you don't feel any oppression from the monetary system, so to speak. But that might not always be practical. Debt's, when we look at it, it's really caused from the issue we just discussed, where, you know, we're spending more than our income, so we have to borrow. And a lot of times, because we're in a culture, or surrounded by a culture, I should say, of debt, we kind of get taught that debt's normal. And because of that, we just have an expectation that it's okay. You know, typically we have to have income to have debt, but at the youngest ages, we're starting people off with debt with a student loan, and they don't even have income. So we're teaching people right from the get-go that you have to have debt. And there's certain challenges with debt that people don't realize, probably the number one being, no matter what you purchase, if you buy something using debt, you're always going to be paying more than it's worth, right? Because you've got to pay the interest on it. Those concepts are relatively new to a lot of people that don't think of it like that. And so it's shifting that mindset. And also making people aware that not all debt is bad. It's not that it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing that we have to deal with. And what we want to know about is what's going to happen in our future, because that's really the key, right? It's going to take away some of our freedom to choose in the future when we have debt. And so we just have to have that understanding. You know, similar, I would say, to being debt-free is having enough savings. The key difference is, you know, when you're debt-free, your money's working for you. When you are in debt, you're working for your money. It's a very different mindset. And so when you have savings, your money's working for you. And you can really have that happiness from that perspective of, hey, I can cover an emergency if it happens, as well as I'm meeting my financial goals. If I set aside money because I want to start a company or a business, you know, in a couple of years, I can do that. If I want to retire at age 50, I can do that. And it's that ability to know that you're on track. The key really is to have realistic expectations. One of my favorite stories is we have one of our clients is the state of Florida, and one of the gentlemen there that runs the retirement plan there. His son just graduated from college, was going to work for a chemical company, large chemical company, and he was telling his dad he was going to retire at age 40. Now his dad works in retirement plans, so his dad said, okay, you know, let's see if you can do that. And so he gave him the GuidedChoice tool. And of course, his son did the numbers, and he was like, okay, he'd have to save every penny he made in order to retire at age 40. It only took one use of the tool, and he had a realistic expectation. But the gist of it is, one of the values he knew he had was he wanted to retire young. That's a good thing. And now he knew, okay, it's not going to be 40, but he could figure it out to retire at 55. So that's what we mean when we talk about realistic expectations. Family agreeing on values is huge. Open communication amongst family members really does reduce tension, especially between spouses. Money is a loaded issue. In fact, if I just say the word money, it conjures up all sorts of different pictures in people's minds. You know, for some people, you know, they see wealth and opulence and, you know, yachts and nice cars. And for other people, you know, they see just trying to put food on the table or shoes on their children. It's very different for everybody. And being able to have those discussions and to have tools that you can use to figure out what are my values in comparison to my spouse's, and sometimes even your children's values. I mean, I can tell stories of people that we've worked with. In one case, it was they couldn't afford a bike that the child wanted for Christmas, and they sat the child down and in essence told them, well, we can't afford it by Christmas, but here's what we're doing. We're saving up for it, and we will be buying it for you in the beginning of the year. And so what they were able to do is really discuss with the child, you know, there are limits, there's trade-offs, and this is a trade-off, and then the child could understand. The very name 3 Nickels comes from my own upbringing. The 3 Nickels app that we have that's financial wellness is from my allowance as a young child. As a young child, my parents gave me 3 nickels, literally. I had 1 nickel that I was supposed to give away, 1 nickel that I was supposed to save, and 1 nickel that I could spend. And that's how I learned how to deal with money. It was an invaluable lesson, stuck with me through my entire life. And when I was at Apple, I began building out these tools that would help people with all 3 aspects of their money. So the 5th one is one that oftentimes gets overlooked or it gets misconstrued, I would say. And that's, you know, the ability to give. You know, we know, so many studies show this, that giving breeds happiness and success. And it doesn't necessarily have to be giving in the, you know, traditional sense of to a charity or something of that value. Just giving gifts to your family members or to your friends, giving of your time. There's so many different ways to give that will trigger that part of your brain that will actually increase happiness in the brain. So it doesn't have to be in the way we necessarily think, although it can be. You know, there's so many great organizations out there, and we definitely have tools that help people find those organizations, and we're doing due diligence on those organizations and partnering with entities that do that due diligence, because that's probably the #1 reason why a lot of people won't give into charities is they don't trust them. And, you know, with the things that have happened historically, who can blame them? So it's, you know, oftentimes we need help. And if we click forward, and the last section is really on the elements of financial contentment. And this really hits at the spiritual aspect of money and of your life and well-being. The goal is really to have power over your money. You want money to work for you versus you working for money. So to do that, you really have to be aware of the trade-offs that you're dealing with. So that you are the one that's making decisions and the best decisions for you. We also need to be aware that the limits we have generally are ones we create. Now, of course, I'm never deny it. Our families, our culture, cultural history, the outside cultures that press in on us, all of these things play a part. Every one of them. But at the end of the day, it still becomes a function of our own internal creation, you know, what we buy into versus what we don't. I would say by far, the 2 most common that we deal with, the first would be a poverty mindset. And oftentimes when I use that term, people think, oh, well, we don't really have to deal with that. You know, our group has enough money. But actually, a poverty mindset, it again, goes beyond income levels and beyond wealth levels. It's really a mindset that the economy as a whole is a pie, and it's a specific size pie. And if I get a bigger slice of the pie, it means you get a smaller slice of the pie. That's a poverty mindset. When we take a look at a growth mindset says, hey, If I'm working and I'm productive in the economy, and you're working and you're productive, hey, that pie grows and it keeps growing. So I can have a bigger slice and so can you. That's a very different way of looking at the world and looking at money. As second to this, and I'm sure we're all aware of the comparison mindset. And that's obviously since social media has exploded. But even prior to that, you know, we had the keeping up with the Joneses kind of concept, or looking out there and wanting what somebody else has. That's a comparison mindset. And what that's doing is it's causing me to spend or to do based on somebody else's values, not my own. That's why I don't always like the financial studies that compare different groups or different cultures. I can share a story. I do a lot of work with lots of different cultures, lots of different groups all over the world. We had a group of Mozambicans in from Africa, from Mozambique, to Stanford, and they were doing a summer program. And a couple of their questions just blew my mind. One was they looked around at our houses and they said, "You build your own houses." And I thought, no, I could never build my own house. But in their culture, they do. They build their own houses. And so we were discussing that. I mean, for them, it's not, you know, you don't have to save and go buy a house that somebody else has built. You actually build it yourself. And then another one was, you know, wow, we really don't enjoy this culture. They were telling me, this was less of a question and more of a comment, but they were asking me, you know, why do I enjoy it? Because what they saw was so many people, and this is in Silicon Valley, so many people were working so hard and not enjoying life and the land and community and family. And we had quite a discussion around that, how some cultures, yeah, they value work more than free time or more than family or more than, you know, whatever. They value things more than the land, more than tradition. So much of this gets tied to you're doing things because of other people's values rather than looking internally to yourself. Now, again, what we see is when we align these values with the way we spend our money. We always say, just look at your checkbook, you know, now look online and see how you spend your money. And how you spend your money is really going to say everything about your true values, not what your cognitive mind might tell you are your values, because you might say things again from the pressure of the culture. But what are your true values? Do you really like to give? You say you like to give, but do you give? If you're not giving, you probably don't really love to give, because I can tell you, I've seen, again, people with very low incomes who give as a percentage more than people with really high incomes. So when we have a value and we live by it, it makes life so much easier. And a true financial wellness program is going to take all of these things into account because they understand people, and people are all different. I mean, I can tell you a story of a friend of mine who's an advisor, had a client who could not sleep at night. And the whole reason was she was churning constantly on money issues, and money stress. And I was thinking when he was describing this that, you know, she didn't have any money. And so she's wondering how she could pay her bills. And, you know, that's what my mind immediately conjured up. You know, turned out she had a net worth of $15 million. $15 million and couldn't sleep at night. Most of us would just think that's insane. But what you have is a misalignment. Once you get people into alignment, they can be at total peace, and it's not tied to income level or wealth, as you can see. If we click forward, the biggest key, you know, again, you could have the best program in the world, and I've seen it over and over, but they don't work unless you reach your people. You have to reach your people with them, and there has to be a motivation to change. There has to be a problem you're trying to solve for them. I mean, I can tell you again, historically, when I was in HR, we had a dictate once came down from our CEO to put in a savings bond program. And I'm like, a savings bond program? None of our employees wanted it. We had high savings rate in so many other places, in our 401k, our ESPP, and we had a credit union program. And they were saving, for the most part, quite fine. And at that time, savings bond programs didn't make sense from the rate of return. But this was one of his pet projects, so therefore we did it. As I'm sure can relate, we've all been there. But the interesting thing was, we told them, okay, they don't really want it, and so I don't think it's really going to fly. We won all sorts of awards on our communications. I had to laugh because we did them very inexpensively, all in black and white, because we didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. And yet what happened? We had very little uptake. No surprise to us. I mean, we did a bang up job. We won awards on the communication, but very little uptake. And that's what you want to avoid. You don't want to add financial wellness because everybody else is doing it. You want to make sure you have your definition of success in place. Just like we would do with an individual in financial wellness, we want to do it on the aggregate. So if we click forward, what are our elements of success? Well, the key is give people what they want when they want it. That, I would say, is kind of number one to this. Like, I can generically sit there and teach you about buying a car. And for the most part, you'll sit and listen and you'll learn new things, and a couple things might stick with you. But if I teach you about buying a car when you want to buy a car, it will all stick with you, because not only when you learn it, you'll live it. And when you live it, you really learn it. In addition, I can tell you generically about cars, but I'll learn better if you personalize it to me. Like, how much car can I afford? You know, should I pay cash for it right now, or should I borrow for the car? I mean, those questions, when you answer those for me personally, now I understand what it means to buy a car. So again, having it at your fingertips and answering those personalized questions is key for your ultimate success and change in behavior, because quite frankly, that's all we're doing here, is trying to change behavior towards money. Secondly, we're fiduciaries, as we know, in the HR world. When we bring in programs, we're fiduciary, and under ERISA, if it's an ERISA program, we know that the benefit has to exceed the cost. Pretty simple. In fact, in everybody's life, that's what we should aim for, right? Is benefits exceeding cost, hopefully, so that we are thriving. Really key for personal care here, because we need a personal touch with these types of things, but we have to have this difference kind of really articulated between, let's say, a financial coach that some programs use, financial advisors that other programs use. The challenge is financial advisors are always fiduciaries. Some programs might use the term financial coach, but they'll say, oh, we're not a fiduciary. I'm one of those, because having been in HR, I'm like, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, will you please just call it a duck? Makes my life easier, and you don't create cognitive dissonance in me. So same thing, make sure the program is a financial fiduciary, period. An advisor, fiduciary, whether they call it coach, whether they call it advisor, whatever. Personal care is key, just make sure they're a fiduciary. Leveraging technology. Technology is, I think, the best way to give consistent answers, because obviously humans, we have biases, and we don't want our biases to kind of go into the equation. And even with technology, people build technology, but at least the bias goes out to everybody equally, if there is a bias. Usually these systems are very mathematically based, so they're objective. But you do want to make sure that you have that ability for objectivity. You also want to make sure you have the ability to retain the data, both the inputs and the outputs, at least 7 years, but I would say indefinitely. Data storage is cheap these days. You can keep it forever. Because, if an employee comes back later and says, hey, I got this advice, I followed the advice, and I have this issue, there should be a clean resolution to it. And then everybody needs to see success. It has to be measurable. Obviously in HR, we know that. We know it needs to be measurable, because we have to show the benefit. But even the employees should be seeing success. So they should be seeing, am I on track? If something changes or tweaks, am I still on track? Now that's what they care about. So it all has to be measurable, both from the big picture as well as from each individual picture. So if we click forward, there might be one more in there. It's the ongoing personal touch, which is your touch points. You know, like anything, things can be going along according to plan. Something happens, the market tanks, a recession, whatever it is. People need that personal touch point to actually kind of sometimes get remotivated, and other times to just be assured. During 2008, our call center, we had thousands of calls, and at that time, we had given advice to well over 1 million people. So over 1 million people, we had thousands of phone calls. We had 2 people change their investments. 2. I mean, it was just not happening for us. It happened for so many other organizations, but we had made sure people understood where they were, what the potentials were, what, where they were on track. And what happened is, yeah, they would call us. We had a personal touch point, but then they would get reassured and they would stick with it. That's what you want. You want to keep people on track, not reacting to the emotions of whatever's going on in the outside world. So key point is to have that on touch, especially as needed. Now, if we click forward, just briefly, why technology? I've touched on this. It's that objective and consistent answer where you don't have personal biases as you do if you've got multiple advisors out there. They all have opinions. Just read the popular press. You can't tell, are we in a recession or are we not in a recession? It seems like an easy answer, and yet we can't seem to answer it. The ability to measure and track progress we discussed, that's just critical. The provision of feedback. Again, when things happen and you want to find out, am I on track or off track? Technology tends to be such a great way to do it. We use a lot of mobile technology, so we can just send a notification, hey, you're on track, stick with it. And that's just a comfortable touch point. And again, people alone, it's really impractical and quite costly if you look at just 1,000 employees. If you're going to try to educate them, put together a plan, and then do follow-up, you're looking at $1 million to $1.5 million to reach 1,000 employees. For most people's budgets, that's going to be beyond what a company of 1,000 people can afford to spend. And so it becomes kind of prohibitive to do the job in the way that's most effective. You might get the education, but it's going to be fairly generic. If we click forward, why people? So you can see I don't really have a bias one way or the other, but why people is because you can't automate everything, at least not yet. We don't have, we kind of have self-driving cars, but they're not perfected. Things aren't perfected to that degree, and people are the best motivators of people. So you want people to be able to encourage you to get on track and then stay on track. People can provide commentary. When you don't really fully understand maybe the advice that you're getting, or you don't fully understand something, people can add that commentary. They can address questions or issues that might be more specific to your scenario. That technology can do a good part of, but maybe not the whole thing. So if we click forward, of course, we all have to be concerned with costs. If you look at technology-only solutions, you can see, you can get typically education and tools free, or sometimes they're free, but they sell product. And so you have to somewhat be concerned as a fiduciary over what products they're selling or how they're selling and that sort of thing. If you do advice, if we click again, advice for technology-only solution typically runs based on assets. So it's 25 basis points, or think of it as 0.25% of the total assets that they give advice on. They'll charge you a basis point fee. And I would say 0.25% is, for a technology-only solution, is kind of the low end. It usually goes 0.25 to about 0.45. But to give you a good idea on what the costs would be, you'd look in that range, and for a technology-only solution. If we click again, we can see the people-only solution, and education and tools is anywhere from $500 to $5,000 per day. A financial planner, if you bring financial planners in and they're fee-based only, they'll run anywhere from $750 to $1,500 per person to set up a plan, $250 to $750 per person ongoing. And again, you can do the advice, and that ends up a basis point fee. So when you look at a cost for 1,000, if we click, you're anywhere from $750,000 to $1.5 million size budget. So these things, in today's world are, oftentimes cost prohibitive to do people only. If we click forward, though, we can also look at kind of a blend. If I have a bias at all, it's to this. It's to a blend of having technology blended with people. Again, oftentimes you get the education and tools for free because, those have been built for years now for some entities. We personally just announced, so this is very exciting because you're getting it hot off the presses. We just announced that an arrangement with Finance. They've been doing education for years. They've got a whole education curriculum with tests and everything, and it's being built right into our app as I speak at no cost. So, these things are coming out, being able to deliver financial literacy to your employees. And I say at no cost, but we always know there's a soft dollar cost because you've got to advertise it, get it out, and the communication side of things, and it takes time. And then financial advice with a financial coach. These, again, it could be anywhere from a couple $100 annually all the way to a basis point fee on the assets. For some, it's driven that way. I actually just stuck in our fee because I thought we're known to be one of the less expensive ones. So I thought if you at least have a gauge, because that's what you're looking for, what's realistic. So if you look at this type of solution for 1,000 people, you have education and advice for $180,000 a year. You can see, the math comes out pretty easily. If we click forward, just quickly to go through the decision-making steps, I would say, step one, identify your pain points. And this could be anything. It could be the 401k, maybe you have low savings rates, low participation, you want to modify that, or maybe it's health and welfare costs are going off the charts and you want to deal with that. Maybe about your employee's debt situation because you're seeing it with hardships and loans from the 401k plan. However you get at that data, and sometimes you can get at the data. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't. You just have to kind of observe, look anecdotally, maybe do employee surveys. You might have economic data in your community that you can use. You might have the gaming compliance issues, whatever that might be. Find your pain point and then determine what benefit or outcome you want to have the program deliver. That could be employee retention and attraction. Right now, that is one of the key factors, especially for new hires coming out of college or out of high school in a first job. You get them on track financially. We just did this not too long ago for an electric contracting firm. This was his hot button because he had gone bankrupt in 2008 as an electrician contractor. And he didn't want any of his employees to suffer the same. So he wanted to do this as he brought employees in to get them on track immediately. It's very exciting to watch the results of that. We have a restaurateur, owns restaurants. He's doing the same thing. So happens they're friends. So they discuss these things. But, you can do this in any industry. You can see the impact on your employee benefit plans pretty clearly, and maybe that's your objective, is to increase savings rates in the 401k or the defined contribution. And then on the long haul, looking for tribal economic impact, looking for, are people better off? Right? And again, that's very personal, because better off doesn't necessarily mean that I have higher net worth or even higher income. It can just mean I'm at peace with where I am with my money. So if we click forward, another key component to the decision making would be the delivery methods. Understand your demographics, because when you know your demographics, you can really help keep your costs reasonable. We know with below age 40-ish, they prefer technology, but they do want people available. So it's not like they don't want people, they just want technology first. Above age 40, they tend to want people first, but they also want technology. So again, you need that flexibility of the both. And then define any specific needs or wants you might have. Maybe you want a financial literacy test for your 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds if they're going to receive a stipend, that you want to make sure they know what they're doing. Maybe you want a debt payoff program. Maybe you want the program, the financial wellness program, to understand your culture and to be able to fit into your culture and be modified to adjust to your culture. And that, I can't overstate that. Ideal, again, like I've said, with so many different cultures, what they think about money, how they handle money, what those pressures are, differ for everyone. So there is no one size fits all. But there is a lot of flexibility that we can have as we design these things. So with that, I don't know if anybody's had questions because I haven't seen any chats, but and I also want to just throw in that last piece, which is kind of a make or break the budget. Make sure that you have your budget numbers when figuring out the overall objectives. But I want to thank you. I know that's a lot of information, probably drinking out of a fire hose, but we have Q&A time. And if we click to the next slide as well, I want to give you the opportunity, if we don't have enough time, to be able to contact us with any questions that you might have. I'm more than happy to help wherever I can help. This is my passion, if you couldn't tell. So questions? Well, I thank you for the kind words. Thank you. Are there?
I don't have a question, but well, I do. So the 3 Nickel app has really intrigued me, and with like you said, the economy today and people changing jobs, it's like I just want to get back on track, and I'm probably speaking for many people. Can I download the 3 Nickel app for free?
Absolutely. The 3 Nickels app is available to anyone. In fact, that, again, keep in mind I come from an HR background. So when you're developing a program like this, what we really wanted to make sure was it would be available to anyone. Okay. We don't want the money to be a hindrance. And so we developed a significant component of it for free. And the free version is actually some of the points that I discussed earlier. And again, like I said, a lot of this research came out of experience at Apple and ironically at HP, collecting that data. But what we found is people need specific answers. So what you'll find in the free tool is specific answers to questions that you have. Now, let me give you the difference. When we give you a specific answer, we give it to you in a silo. So you say, how much car can I afford? We ask a couple questions and then we give you that answer. But we're not looking at the whole big picture. When we look at your whole big picture, we give you what's called a wealth management answer. That would be different. We're looking at everything. It's the same thing when we do retirement wellness, we look at just retirement in and of itself. So we might recommend, oftentimes we do, that you save 2 or 3 times what you're currently saving to get on track for your retirement goal. But we're not looking at your budget. We don't know if you can afford to do that. We're just saying that's what you need to do to get to your goal. When we look at wealth management, we would tell you what to save for retirement, looking at the whole picture and can you afford to save that much? And we'd be optimizing based on the whole picture. That's what we would call advice. That does have the cost. That's the $180 a year, and that has a cost associated with it. But if you look at the value equation for $180 a year, you are getting a financial advisor on all your questions being answered from a holistic approach. So you can't go to a financial advisor at that level or that cost. Even if you have, let's say, financial advice in your 401k plan, you're paying more than that per account, individuals are. So, value-wise, that's what the value looks like. The free version, though, it's built on the exact same chassis. So what you're getting for free is all the same quality advice. We just can't look at the whole picture because we don't have it. There's your big difference. And you know, when we look at that chassis, that's built, my co-founder's Dr. Harry Markowitz. Many people don't know that name, but he's the Nobel laureate for what's called modern portfolio theory. There's your Greek for the day. It just means don't put all your eggs in one basket. So you all kind of know it. And he's the inventor of that. He's also the architect of our whole system. And so it's a very deliberate system, very objective, and very detailed. Covers a lot. So yeah, you get that the value of that whole system in the free tool. Great
Wonderful.
question. Thank you for that.
Thank you. You're very welcome. And Sherry's information is on the screen right now. If you would like to have a copy of Sherry's presentation, please reach out to her. I've downloaded the Free Nichols app, so I want to take a look at it. And Sherry, will you be in San Antonio?
I will. I will be in San Antonio, and I'm very excited, so excited to see you all. I am I have to say, I am really I'm off the charts excited for this. Maybe I'll share that story in San Antonio. This is kind of, for me, a dream come true. So I want to thank all of you. This is such an honor for me. I cannot overstate it. This is literally come true. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're excited to see you there and see you speak at our conference. So we are so excited to learn from you. And for everyone, Sherry's session will be on our NAHRA YouTube channel this coming Friday. Sherry, thank you so much, and the team really appreciate speaking to you and learning from you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, everyone have a great day and a great rest of the week. Love you.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Janet and NNAHRA. Have a great day.
Bye, Tony.
Hi, Tony.